Hello guys, my name is Jericho and I'm here to talk about the reproductive system. So the first question is, describe the structure and explain the function of male and female human reproductive system. So first, let's describe the structure of the female reproductive system, which involves ovary. It is where it produces oocytes, or what you may call egg, and they produce reproductive hormones such as estrogen and progesterone. And then the fallopian tube. It is connected through the ovary and it transports sperm cell to an egg cell. And then the uterus. It is responsible for nurturing the fertilized ovum that will turn soon into a fetus and holding it until an infant is ready for birth. And what's next is the cervix, which is to allow the menstrual blood from the uterus to vagina. And it also allows sperm to connect to the uterus during an intercourse. And then it's vagina, which connects the uterus and cervix to the outside body, which may allow intercourse, menstruation, and childbirth. So the function of the female reproductive system is mainly to produce the ova or oocyte, which you may call an egg cell. And its system is designed to transfer the ova to the fertilization site. And now we're in the male reproductive system. So the structure in the male reproductive system involves penis, which delivers semen into the vagina during sexual intercourse. And next is the scrotum, which is the one who protects the testes and acts as a climate control system for the testes. And what's next is the testes, which is the one who produce gametes or sperm, and they secrete hormones, primarily testosterone. And next is the epididymis, which is the one who transports and store sperm cells that are produced in the testes. Next is the urethra, which is the one who carries the sperm or the urine to the outside of the body. And now it's the vas deferens, which is the one who transports mature sperm cells to the urethra in preparation for ejaculation. Next is the prostate, which is a gland that secretes prostate fluid that is one of the components of the semen. And lastly are the seminal vesicles, which are the two small glands that are the one who stores and produce majority of the fluid that makes up the semen. The function of the male reproductive system is to maintain, transport, and nourish sperm cells and protective fluid, which is the semen, which is soon to be discharged in the female reproductive tract. And for the next question is to differentiate between asexual and sexual reproduction, external and internal fertilization, and indirect and direct development. Asexual reproduction is the one who produces the offspring genetically identical to one parent. Sexual reproduction, on the other hand, just means combining genetically material from two parents. And now we're in the internal versus external fertilization. So fertilization means the fusion of the haploid gametes, which are the sperm and egg, to form the diploid zygote. External fertilization is when the male and female's gamete unite outside of the female's body. Internal fertilization, on the other hand, is when a male directly deposits his sperm into the female's body. And now we're here in indirect versus direct development. Indirect development is a type of development on which an embryo develops into mature individual without involving a larval stage. Direct development, on the other hand, is a widespread alternate reproductive mode living in amphibians that is characterized by evolutionary laws free living aquatic larval stage. For the next question is describe the events associated with the human sperm and egg production and explain how hormones influence them. So first, let's have a sperm production. So it begins with a spermatogenesis and it triggers the hormonal cascade. So when puberty begins, the hypothalamus starts to secrete GnRH and tells the anterior pituitary to secrete FSH and LH into the blood. So the LH spurs the Leydig cells to release the testosterone. And now the FSH triggers the Sertoli cells or sustentacytes to release the androgen binding protein. And now the androgen binding protein binds the testosterone to trigger the production of the sperm cells. The testosterone then targets the spermatogonia to continue dividing through mitosis. And now they begin to produce two different spermatogonia, which are the type A cell and type B cell. So the type A cell stays up near in the basal lamina and just keeps dividing. The type B cell, on the other hand, gets pushed down through the tubule towards the lumen and turns into a primary spermatocyte. The primary spermatocytes, which is a type B cell, goes under meiosis 1 and forms two smaller haploid cells, which are called secondary spermatocytes. Then the secondary spermatocytes goes to meiosis 2 and resulting daughter cells of the total 4 round spermatids. The spermatid then elongates a tail or a flagellum in order to become immobile, that you may call it a spermiogenesis. And that's the whole process of making a sperm. And now we're here for the egg production. It begins with oogenesis or egg making is when the female is physically ready to be able to reproduce. It begins with the ovarian cycle, which is the maturation of the only one follicle which will end up to support the single matured egg. So, when the puberty begins, the hypothalamus starts to secrete gonadotropin hormone that stimulates the anterior pituitary to release FSH and LH. The FSH triggers the follicle itself to secrete the estrogen hormones which signals the follicle to mature even more. The LH, on the other hand, gets to work with the oocyte by triggering it to divide again and completes meiosis 1 and move on to the metaphase 2. When the follicle is now matured, it pushes against the ovary wall, ruptures with the help of the enzymes. It breaches the ovary walls and ejects a single matured oocyte, and which is now it's ovulated. And now the damaged follicle in the ovary now slow its estrogen and soon to become the corpus luteum, which will eventually degenerate. It releases the final hormone with a bunch of progesterone and estrogen and some inhibin together to stop the release of FSH and LH. So when the egg pushes or exits from the ovary, it has to reach the peritoneal cavity in order to reach the fallopian tube. Whether the egg is fertilized or not, it goes through the fallopian tube and reaches the uterus, and that's the whole process of an egg production. So the next question is, describe the events in human fertilization until childbirth, particularly the appearance of sex differences and what triggers them. So it begins with the zygotic stage. It is occurred after 24 hours of fertilization, that when a zygote turns from 1 cell to 16 cells, which is called a blastomere. And now, after the 3 days of fertilization, the morula is then formed. And next stage is the blastocyst stage. This is when a morula will turn into a blastocyst that will eventually go down to the uterus together with the zygote. And the next stage is the embryonic stage. It is the period after the implantation where blastocyst will turn into the various type of cells and eventually turn into an embryo. And the next stage is the fetus stage. This is an embryo. This is a stage where an embryo develops around the 8th week and begins to develop organs and bones and continues to develop even more. When the fetus continues to develop even more, it will eventually reach to parturition, which is the childbirth. In the appearance of sex differences is when the fetus starts producing hormones that triggers sex organs to produce either male or female organs. And the last question is, explain on how contraceptives prevents pregnancy and give examples of sexually transmitted infections. Well, the contraceptives prevent from the male and female gametes from meeting up together, which is to prevent fertilization. So the examples of STIs are human immunodeficiency virus. Next is acquired immune deficiency syndrome. And lastly is genital herpes. There are more examples of STIs. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something about the reproductive system.